on
probably be finished with Undertale about the time it's my turn to host a podcast again, or what?
yes, that's the plan.
Cool.
I have a topic for next week.
Oh, you're correct.
Because we did the podcast I had been planning for weeks in advance ahead of time.
Yes. Boy. Apparently, Kratos has been added to Fortnite, and everyone is like, how far the gods have fallen.
I mean, Thor was already on there.
Yeah, but different Thor. Not like the person who's supposed to be all like gritty and deadly doing Fortnite dances and weird.
Thor's aesthetic kind of fits into the whole Fortnite garishly colored poor.
Because it's like the style of Thor they have in Fortnite, from what I've seen, is
It's like comic book.
the comic book, very colorful version of it.
Right. Whereas Kratos is kind of almost monochrome except for the red kind of face paint stuff, and
I think weren't the older God of War games a little flashier in terms of presentation? Or
I haven't played any of them or seen any of them. I have no idea.
I've seen a little bit of the footage from
they're like hack and slash beat 'em ups more than anything.
From what I see.
Whereas the newer one just kind of took a different speed altogether with the whole dad of boy thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested in playing that.
I would play God of War 4. I don't know if I'd bother with any of the other ones.
I might try like an early one to see what it was about beforehand. Like,
because I think it's supposed to be like the same.
Oh yeah, there's like a continuity going on.
Yep, that'd be interesting. But then that would mean there had to be a PS4 to do it on, and I guess it'll probably be a while before one can get a hold of a affordable PS5 because scalpers be doing their thing.
Scalpers
apparently
be scalping.
Scalpers be scalping.
And all sorts of hype for Cyberpunk going around the interwebs these days.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's because it releases like next weekend.
Now.
This weekend.
This weekend.
Yes.
I believe the physical copies are supposed to have started going out already as of the recording of this episode.
Neat.
The pre-orders, that is.
I'm still not entirely sure what the game is.
It's.
I mean, it's like a
it's
sci-fi
an RPG.
future.
It's like a Skyrim-esque
sort of thing.
RPG. It's kind of like Fallout, except in that sort of just very big open world RPG
But instead
style.
Instead of desolate wastelands or like large open country, it's a dense populous city.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So imagine if GTA was a futuristic RPG and you're there, but with more complexity, obviously,
with more
to the game's
just more.
And
And also Keanu Reeves because
Because Keanu Reeves.
why not? When he was cast for that role, he was at the height of his power.
You're assuming he's reached his final form.
True, but I mean, like if you kind of look at it like on a data plot, like that was sort of one of his peaks. It may not be the ultimate peak, but it was one of them.
It was an instantaneous peak.
Yeah, slightly higher than when he was doing stuff like The Matrix and rom-coms, that type of thing, in his younger days.
Yeah, with John Wick and the Cyberpunk "You're Beautiful" meme.
You're breathtaking.
No, breathtaking. That's what it is.
Me and my dog, just like little Keanu Reeves and big Keanu Reeves walking down the stage.
Yeah. He wasn't really a guy I was aware of. I was aware that he was in like Bill and Ted and
The Matrix
but he wasn't like. I don't know.
I hadn't really. Well, I think there's some.
There was some of the very first memes in like the golden era of memes were of Keanu Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
He was much more of a cult figure, not an occult, much more of a
niche
cult niche figure. Yes.
Yeah. There's some movies where I'm like, oh, I had no idea Keanu Reeves was in that. It's kind of like when you buy a car, suddenly you see that car everywhere you go. It's like when you think about Keanu Reeves, it's like, oh, he keeps showing up in these different places in my life.
Wait, it's all Keanu Reeves?
It
Always has been.
Wait, this is the way? It always has been.
Mandalorian season 2 is going for you guys. I'm enjoying it.
I would say it's getting interesting, but I mean, the whole season has been interesting.
Have you
I have not managed to catch up on it. I was doing errands and watching content for today.
Yeah.
Got it.
Fair enough.
I didn't finish the content for today, but we'll get that when we talk about the content.
What I like,
you could have watched the content for today while I was watching it today.
I could have if I wasn't like finishing up my final writing project that I should hopefully ever have to do ever in a non-work environment.
Yeah. When are you done with finals?
Most of my finals will be turned in by the end of this week. Next week is just like makeup stuff and
cool.
Getting my grades. So
then we can produce lots of content.
Mm-hmm.
If that
maybe even a little bit of a holiday buffer if we have time. But and bumpers.
Yes, those are projected for the future. Of course, we have been wanting to do them since day one,
right?
But we just haven't
for
done
various
it.
reasons. Mostly me not feeling like it. We just haven't done it, but it is going to be a concerted effort to sort of elevate the production quality as time goes on.
I don't know if Riley was in the room when I made the joke, but after we get our bumpers recorded, it would be funny if we did an episode on the Pixar animated film Cars and titled the episode Bumper Cars.
Like the whole point of the episode, it doesn't really have much to do with cars, but we just have bumpers and
just play all of our bumpers several times. These are the bumpers, guys. Get sick of them before we use them.
Yeah. It's funny with like the podcasts I listen to that have bumpers, and the hosts are like, these are controversial. Some people like it, some people hate it. I was like, there are only those who love them. What are you talking about?
There are only those who love them and those who do not love the podcast.
Those who are truly lost.
From my point of view, I don't love the bumpers. Then you are lost.
Then you are truly lost. From my point of view, Google Maps is wrong. And you are truly lost. There was a time when online maps weren't all that trustworthy. I mean, if Google is someday burned to the ground through antitrust stuff, at least they provided something useful to humanity in Google Maps. Like actually practically everyday useful. Mm-hmm. And, their search engine and all that stuff. So, I mean, there's, some stuff there, but it's weird how they removed "Don't be evil" as their motto. I was like, why of all the mottos would you get rid of that one?
That's a concerning motto.
Like just the optics of that is like, why would you move away from
I think the optics is the only reason they did it, because it implies that there exists some definite evil that you cannot be. And that's the whole thing.
And it's based
that they're
in
bucking
California,
against.
So that makes sense.
The Sodom and Gomorrah of our time.
San Francisco.
Yeah. We were rewatching Avengers Endgame this week. I hadn't seen it since we watched it in theaters back in 2019 for whatever reason. But it was like
out in theaters in 2018.
No,
19.
It was spring 19.
Oh, you said in Endgame, not Infinity
Endgame,
War.
yeah.
Endgame was 19.
Yeah. And it was funny when like Scott Lang wakes up, or it comes out of the van in San Francisco and everything's all dilapidated. I was like, that's probably this is like, yes, they totally abnormally messed up at San Francisco.
The very much abnormal condition of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally contrary to what it is most of the time.
I would love to hear Monsignor speak his mind on that whole situation, being a San Francisco native himself.
Indeed.
Although, I mean, he hasn't like actively lived there
for a very long
long time. But he was there long enough to tell lots of cool stories.
Of the two priests working at our Newman Center, I don't think I would have pegged Monsignor as being the one from California.
I mean, you wouldn't initially think that, but then, like, as you get to know him better, he's like, there's like, oh yeah, he's from California.
Right.
Well, you very at least recognize he's not from around here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Very quickly.
Mm-hmm. But yes, there are good people from California, but all the good people are leaving. So I haven't heard of any reports of people turning around and turning into pillars of salt, but I'm sure that'll. Like, if I was from California, that would definitely be.
You're
me.
Already salt, man.
Yeah. No, I would.
You're a salt of the earth kind of person.
Yeah. If I stay in one place too long, nothing grows.
No.
Which is really ironic because I'm a plant.
They're just layers to your irony.
I was bit by a radioactive plant so that I can't kill myself from saline poisoning by a radioactive Venus flytrap.
That's like the only plant that can properly bite you.
Yeah, and like not really bite.
Most plants, their bark is worse than their bite.
Yep. Due to the lack of bite, but overabundance of bark.
Yes.
It's the frequency that counts. Well, speaking of frequency, we try to upload once a week. We're the Palladian Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
And also, speaking of frequency, we're talking about a World War I type thing again this week. I mean, Wonder Woman is only, the first movie is in World War I, but she's not a uniquely World War I character.
Right.
We are talking about 1917, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to remember, it came out last year, didn't it?
I think late last year.
Last year. Oh yeah, we still have it open on the TV.
2019.
2019. There
I
it is.
remember listening to an episode of the Sub Beacon about it, before things shut down. So, maybe December.
Sure.
I want to say it was late last year. I was thinking about going to it, after I graduated, I think, but I didn't get around to
I
it.
had heard you mention it and talk about it occasionally, but that's as far as
if I wasn't
aware of
broke,
it.
I would have probably gone to a movie to celebrate. But, so the film 1917, as the name would imply, takes place during the First World War.
What year?
I want to say...
I can't quite remember.
I can't quite place the year. I'd
Okay.
put it somewhere between 1900 and 1984.
That checks out.
Yeah. No lies detected. But yeah, so we open up with two soldiers kind of resting on a warm spring day. Yes, so Lance Corporal Schofield and Lance Corporal Blake are summoned to the sort of headquarters station to do a task. He's like, hey, Corporal Blake, pick a buddy. We got a job for you guys to do. I'm like, okay, whatever. It's some chore or whatever they want us to, or errand they want us to run. Let's go see what it is. And so they're sort of making small talk as they are making their way through the trenches into the headquarters, which this film is shot a lot like, so if you guys have ever seen the movie Gravity, where the opening sequence for that movie is all filmed to look like it's one shot. But nearly the entire movie is filmed to look this way. I mean, there's some tricks and hidden cuts that they use, but it's pretty seamless.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we follow them as they make their way through the trenches, and it gives us kind of a cross section of what it was like to be in the trenches during World War I as an English soldier. So they're kind of wondering what's going on, and then they go see the general, who's like, so Corporal Blake, you have a brother, Lieutenant Blake, who's in this other unit down the way, 8 miles away, I believe it was, or something like that. The Germans have retreated, but they've set up a new line, and they're trying to bait this unit into attacking and being ambushed. So all those guys are going to die pretty much unless you go warn them. And the Germans, as they retreated, cut all of the phone lines, so they couldn't just reach them that way, so they had to send them as runners. So they give them some equipment and a little extra food and supplies, and they're like, all right, get on over there. And so they make their way to the front line, and all their comrades are like, "You guys are nuts!" Like, as far as they can tell, the Germans are still in their other position. Now, to those who might not be familiar with the way war was fought in World War One, the opposing sides would basically dig trenches like a mile apart from each other in lines, and would set up all sorts of traps and barbed wire and machine gun nests and things like that in the space between, called no man's land, because if you went through there, you're basically gonna die. And so they would basically every once in a while send troops across to try to take the other person's trench, and it was a very casualty heavy way of fighting war. And so the soldiers, knowing the dangers of no man's land, are very nervous about going over the top, as they call it. But they're assured by the commanders, like, the Germans have pulled back, you should have a straight shot. But and they make their way across no man's land, and there's a lot of tense moments and a lot of they come across like bodies that are decaying and like people who died in grotesque ways, and traps and different obstacles to navigate, rats everywhere, just all the horrors of war. And it's a very like gloomy, tense situation because, you know, there's danger around every corner basically.
Insofar as there are corners.
Yeah, right. It's, yeah. That's the other thing too, is there's virtually no cover if they were to be shot at. So they managed to make their way safely, more or less, to the German line, which they found out as they were told that the Germans had indeed left and burned everything that they couldn't bring with them. And so as they start investigating and looking for ways to get through there to try to get to the, to the other unit, they start investigating these tunnels, and a rat accidentally sets off a tripwire, and they nearly get buried. So Blake manages to pull Schofield from
a big pile of rubble
and basically save his life. And as they're making their way through once they get past the German line, it breaks into more normal looking, I want to say, French countryside. And so if, in this area, you would hardly be able to tell there's a war because there's still like farmhouses, which are a little shelled out, but there's farmhouses with like a cow that's still there.
And a casual bucket of milk sitting there on the lawn.
Somebody had just recently been there. And so as they're walking along, they're starting to learn a little more about each other. We learned that, Blake is sort of a younger guy, hasn't been around as long, but we find out that Schofield had been present at and even decorated for his bravery at the Battle of the Somme, which is one of the bloodiest battles of a already incredibly bloody First World War. And so he learned that, Blake asks him where his medal's at because he knew he'd been decorated. He's like, I traded it away with a French officer for, it was like coffee or something. He's like,
I think you said a bottle of wine.
A bottle of wine, yeah. He's like, why would you do that? I don't know, it's just a piece of tin. He's like, yeah, but
it's got a ribbon on it too.
Yeah, it's got a ribbon on it too. It symbolizes bravery and, honorable, honorable discharge of duty and whatnot. And the soldier, and Schofield's like, yeah, it doesn't basically.
I survived.
Yeah, I survived.
I was celebrated for surviving.
Schofield's kind of a downer.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of is. He's very jaded by the war.
And he's kind of mad at Blake for dragging him into this incredibly stressful and dangerous mission.
Despite
he's like, I didn't. Right. It's like, hey, I thought they were just going to send us to take out the trash. Like, I didn't know that this was going to be a whole thing.
Whereas Blake is a bit more of a chipper, go get 'em kind of lad.
Making all sorts of comment, like they go through a cherry orchard with the blossoms and things, and he's picking out like the different varieties and different things like that. And also he's very motivated to try to get there as quickly as possible because his brother, his life is in danger, in pretty immediate danger. I mean, even for wartime. And so while they're in this farmstead, they kind of pause for a little bit. before they move on, and they notice there's like a biplane battle going on overhead, and one plane, crashes nearby them, and the plane lights on fire, but the pilot's still alive, so they pull the pilot out of the wreckage and try to help him out. And when Schofield tries to go for some water from the pump, to try to like treat this pilot, who's a German pilot, he turns around and the pilot is stabbing his buddy. So they kill the pilot, and then because he was mortally wounded, basically holds Blake as he bleeds out and tries to comfort him and promises him that he'll get to his brother, right his mom, and complete the mission. So he dies, and just after this, another group of soldiers, British soldiers, comes through, and they're like, "Yeah, sorry about your friend guy," and they give him a lift in their trucks, part of the way to where he needs to go, because they're also going that way. But a bridge what's that?
I was just gonna say, until they got to a bridge that was
knocked
destroyed.
out. Yeah, and so he's like, well, I can't afford
to lose time going around to the next,
because the battle is supposed to be basically right away in the morning, and I have to get there before then, and it's getting later in the day. So he crosses the bridge under sniper fire to the other side of the river, so he can make his way through the town to where the friendly unit is. And so he gets into a battle with the sniper and sneaks into the house where the sniper is hiding, and they both shoot each other at the same time. The German soldier hits him on the helmet and doesn't kill him, but knocks him backwards, and he hits his head and gets knocked out because he falls down a flight of stairs. And he wakes up sometime in the middle of the night, bleeding from the head and stuff, and sort of wanders his way through this town in pitch dark, filled with hostile soldiers. And through a couple of harrowing experiences, he ends up in this house where this French woman is hiding with a baby that she's taking care of. She doesn't know who the parents are, but she's taking care of her. And so she sort of treats his wounds a little bit and
helps him figure out where he's supposed to go.
Because he speaks broken French and she speaks broken English, and so they manage to communicate a little bit. Like, she gives him directions. And he sort of has sort of a pause in like all the tenseness like going on, and he has a chance to sort of remember home a little bit, because he has a family of his own back home that he had mentioned to Blake earlier how much he hated going home, because leaving to go back to the war and knowing you may never see them again was too much. But then he has to press on, even though it's pretty dangerous and the sun's coming up, so the soldiers might see him. So he runs through the town, being chased by the German soldiers, and jumps into the river to escape, and winds up on the shoreline near where he needs to be. He's exhausted and stuff, but then he sort of hears like softly like somebody singing over the hill through the woods. So he goes through the woods and finds the unit he's looking for, and sort of pauses, exhausted, and just listen. Like, all these soldiers are kind of waiting to go into battle, but they're listening to this one guy sing a really kind of haunting, sort of not quite a dirge, but it's like a very mournful, longing kind of a song, kind of like I'm a poor wayfaring stranger. And so after that's done, they're like, "Hey, buddy, where'd you come from?" He's, all soaking wet from the river. He has barely any of his equipment left.
They know he's not from their unit because he's got different epaulets.
Mm-hmm. And this is like already well through the morning, so he thought he had already missed the
whole unit.
The whole
he
unit
thought they'd already
being
left.
sent into battle, into the ambush. And and they're like, "Hey, we're from I can't remember the name of the unit, but we're from the unit." He's like, "Oh, that's the unit I'm looking for. Like, where's your commander?" He's like, "Wait, why haven't you guys already gone into battle?" It's like, we're the second wave. We haven't gone yet. And so he knows, like, oh crap, there's still time. I gotta hurry. And so he's making his way through the trenches to find the commanding officer to give him the orders from the general to stop the attack. And the first wave starts going over, and he basically has to book it like through the open battlefield, which is like the big iconic shot of the movie where he's running and there's explosions and people charging by him trying to rush to save as many lives as he can by delivering the message. So he manages to get into the colonel's headquarters, who's like, he's kind of gung-ho. Well, not gung-ho, but he's like very determined to win what he sees as an easy victory, and the Germans to him are retreating even though it's a trap and he doesn't know it.
I think he's also more like, I don't care if it's a trap. We've come this far, and pulling my troops back now is just going to make them all die anyway.
Right.
So we may as well fight for something instead of die for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's just being a total idiot about it. Like, he knows his way around battle.
He does his duty and calls off the attack, but then he's like,
They'll just call me back next week and say, go in at dawn.
Mm-hmm.
None of this matters.
Yep. The way this war is being fought is totally a waste of human life, and the only way one side's going to win is if they're the last man standing, basically, which was sort of the nature of that war. So he calls off the attack and manages to find Blake's brother and give him his dog tags and like
his ring
that he had, and offer his condolences. And after that, and sort of like trying to comfort him a little bit, he finds a tree in a field, which mirrors like the opening shot of the movie, basically, where he's leaning up against a tree resting. And so, to me, I guess he looks at pictures of his family and then it fades to black, and that's the movie. What I saw that when I initially watched the movie is like the fact that the movie ends as it began, kind of shows how just every day there's just a new. Mm-hmm. You're just facing death again in some other way. Like for those soldiers, like life had very little, you like there was very little chance you were going to make it home alive in those circumstances, and so like every day is just the same old story. And another thing that reinforces that is like they're going through their own unit's camp at the beginning of the movie is like they kind of talk to some of their comrades who are just kind of like depressed or trying to find a few moments rest or something like that, but they're just totally cynical, like, all right, well, go do your thing, but you're probably gonna die. Hopefully you know that. Like the one sergeant or whatever is like, hey, if the Germans manage to get you, throw your flare gun back.
We need one.
Yeah, I kind of hate it when the Germans get them. Just kind of like, well, you're probably gonna die, but in case that happens, at least give me my flare gun back.
Because those are expensive. We don't got many of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's not a terrible lot of complexity to 1917 as far as the plot goes.
I think, the interesting thing about the movie isn't the complexity of the plot. It's actually the simplicity of everything. Because you literally follow a day in the life of two World War I soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a full day for one and a half day for another.
Yeah.
But either way, both the days end.
Yeah.
It's really like half a day for one and 1.5 for another.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Blake doesn't survive the first day by any means.
And it's interesting too because like Schofield is sort of jaded by the war, like he's already seen a bunch, and this young kid who's barely in the war at all is the one who dies, and he's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of like right as they're about to go over the wall of the trench, Schofield's like, age before beauty. He's like, if someone's getting their head blown off, poking it up, it's going to be me.
Mm-hmm. Like sort of illustrating how he's like, becomes so...
It just doesn't care anymore almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the only thing keeping him going is knowing his family's still at home. Otherwise he would basically
and the fact that he has a duty to Blake.
Right. Yeah.
Despite really, really not wanting to.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of signed up for this.
He's like, well, we made it across no man's land. It's too late to go back now. Basically have to do this. But then once Blake is killed, he's like, okay, I have like you said, a duty to fulfill. But it's kind of similar to the way Dunkirk was made, where not very much dialogue. Although in this movie there's a bit more dialogue than in Dunkirk, but it's very much atmospheric and tension is what drives the movie.
Right. You get a cross section of what it felt like to be in that scenario. You don't get like some grand view of the war as a whole and the politics and the big stuff. It's like two guys just trying to not get blowed up as they go to from one point A to point B.
Trudge through the mud, the blood, and the horror.
And it shows with very little restraint, really, just kind of how casually awful things were. There's just
like
how
the guy's like, don't go through that crater. It's literally full of dead bodies. You don't want to get stuck in that. Just like as death has become so normalized to these guys that they barely even think about it anymore.
And it's kind of just kind of atrocious,
grotesque,
like horrors of war but it's not horrifying to the main characters. These horrors are part of their daily life at this point.
Yeah, they've become, what's the word I'm looking for? They've become sort of desensitized, like dramatically.
I've become so numb.
Yeah, but like dramatically, like desensitized to the point where, like, you know, these awful things just are. Yeah, like you said. Just
so while the audience member may be disturbed and uncomfortable by the things the camera's casually panning by,
this is just one day for these
although
guys.
A little grossed out, are just kind of continuing like it's every day.
They go through all sorts of hell just to accomplish their duty. And one of the problems with World War I was like just the general incompetence of the leaders who fought it, or the leaders of the soldiers who fought it. Because, like we mentioned in the last week's episode, World War I was a time when a lot of new technologies and ways to kill people had been developed, but they were still using a lot of tactics that were outdated that just led to egregious loss of life and very little gain either way. The war was a glorified stalemate for the majority of like the 4 years or so it was fought. And yeah, it just led to a lot of loss of life. And from some of the documentaries and different things I've seen, like the people fighting it, like it wasn't like in World War II where it was like black and white, sort of like, you know, our side.
It was pretty clear who was the good guy and who was the bad guy in World War II.
In World War I, these were just people fighting for the ambitions of their political leaders. Like most of the guys are like, yeah, like would just as soon fight alongside the enemy as fight against them, you know. But yeah, that's the gist of 1917. So we're gonna, you know, talk about it and give like some of the transcendental analysis. But I would definitely recommend watching it to truly experience the movie.
Right. It's like we told you the whole story, and it's not like spoilers are.
No.
I mean, I only saw half the film, so the spoilers don't really deter me. From
He had to go to
wanting
bed,
see
not
the
because
other
he
half.
didn't find it interesting.
No, because it was 9:00 and I had work the next morning at 5:40, like I usually do.
He's a responsible boy.
I left after the first and pretty much only cut in the film.
Yeah, where he blacks out.
Only like
Real
definitive
like
cut.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that when we get to the presentation part. But
So yeah. So it's a kind of a somber movie. Not really one you know, watch and eat popcorn for like the heart-stopping action or anything like that. There is action, but it's not an entertaining movie. That's not the point. It's more of a almost meditative kind of movie, I guess, on like the fallenness of man almost.
just how bad things can get.
But that being said, like, what are some things that we liked about the movie?
I really liked like how it was all one panning shot for the most part. I thought it was interesting because it was a thing that I was conscious of the whole time. It didn't take me out of it.
Like, I knew this was one of the selling points of the movie going into it.
And so but knowing that it was created to all look like one singular shot, they still managed to create some interesting angles in like the camera work. And had it been any other movie, that particular camera angle would have been fairly normal and kind of ho-hum. But the fact that you got to that point, like when they were going across no man's land, there was this like pond or like this puddle of water that they were skirting around the edge of.
Yeah.
But the camera took a path directly over the water and followed them from like a distance before meeting back up with them and going more over the shoulder. And so that pan going from the land to the water to back near them was like a cool little, just you're floating around watching from this perspective. It was like,
Yeah.
so getting from point A to point B to
Cinematography
point
through
C.
movement as opposed to like
Yeah.
shots and
And
that-
cuts.
cuts, yeah.
But it also allowed for this real, like, physical closeness to the characters. As you're going through the trenches, you're like, the camera is uncomfortably, like, awkwardly placed over their shoulders and peeking around corners, and you don't see what they don't see. And when they're going through the tunnels, it'll hesitate before they go around the corner and see that nothing's there, but you're still tensed up.
Because you don't know what's around the corner any more than they do.
Right. And so I think that the camera, the seamlessness of the camera, was not only just a really neat creative choice, it really tied itself into the experience of walking with these soldiers.
In their shoes, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely something I liked. And then I'm a sucker for realism in historical movies, that type of thing. It's like one thing I noticed they did with, and maybe this goes into the beauty aspect of it in terms of execution, but the use of color and scenery, because the color palette of when they're like in the trenches or in no man's land or something is like very grays, blacks, browns, like very bleak, sort of drab, to reflect sort of the guts and the
In fact, it only gets
mud
like
and-
grittier and darker as they go through no man's land and toward the German camp. And in the German camp, it's all like gray and cold and empty.
because and then, like all like there's like everything's like kind of scorched because they burnt the place down before they retreated. But once they get past the lines and into the countryside, it's a weird juxtaposition where things are like, you kind of get the feel things are a little more peaceful. It's springtime. It looks like there's cherry blossoms and there's grass and cows and different things.
So in that little moment of the two guys having a conversation and getting to know each other, that little reprieve, there's a little more color. There's a little breath of fresh air.
And then as well as like at the beginning of the movie where they're resting like in a grassy field, and then they
It's
go
like
into
the moments of rest juxtaposed with the moments of tension or like fear. It's like,
yeah. So I found that pretty interesting. And then like the moments of sunshine and the moments of like cloudiness and overcast are like also like follow those same that same pattern.
It's almost like environmental storytelling.
Yeah.
Or like it's like the atmosphere of the story is being set by the environment they're in, but it also like it forwards the storytelling in a way. I don't know. I may have repeated myself there, but it's you know what I mean.
And sort of like the transition to where he like makes his way out of the river, which is full of bodies that have floated down the river. Like when he goes into that forest, it's sort of a halfway in between point because there's these guys who are resting there before they go into battle. So you have the green, the wind in the trees, and these guys resting. And the one soldier is singing that song, which I'm probably gonna pull up the lyrics because I think it's. I listened to the song before I watched the movie. While I'm looking this up, Riley, what did you like about or what struck you about the movie?
I think one of the things that I found the most interesting was the way that Schofield kind of took up the personality of Blake after he died. Schofield was a very kind of different guy than Blake at the start. But he sort of has this moment of personal recognition of what this mission meant to Blake, what this, he had so much personal invested into it. So he kind of had this moment of realization, like, as gross and disgusting and just awful this war is, this is meaningful. What I'm doing here is going to save 1,600 lives if I get there. I have the ability to make meaning out of this, even though it seems so meaningless.
Yeah, because like in the grand scheme of the war, it may seem meaningless, but at least this small part he plays is meaningful and impactful.
He learned from Blake the personal investment, that there's a personal
the value in the little
things. He made
things.
it personal.
Yeah.
He gave him a person to save.
And the value in the little things too, because like like the guy's like, yeah, my mom worked in like a cherry orchard or something like that, so he's going through all the varieties. Like Schofield's like, I don't know, they look the same to me. But it's sort of that little bit of dialogue sort of reveals like kind of their difference of attitude before Schofield has this change of heart, or as it were, because he doesn't see what's the point in telling apart different cherries.
You can't save everybody.
But he's like, they taste different. I think he says something to that effect. Which, now that I think about it, it's kind of like, I can't remember the exact verse, but like, you shall know them by their fruits. So like, even though it might seem meaningless, by the fruit of your actions, like saving lives, things are worthwhile.
Right. He may not have felt like he contributed much because he can't save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have to save everybody if he can save everybody he can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if they are sent the next day to go die again, at least he was able to save them for one more day. So yeah, I've got the lyrics for Wayfaring Stranger, which is not the Johnny Cash version. Oh wait, no, hold on, it is.
It's probably the same song. It's just he's done.
It might be a folk song that Johnny Cash did, but then
I mean, is it the I'm Only Going Over Jordan?
Yep.
That's Andrew plays that.
Oh, okay.
As in your brother-in-law.
Yes. So yeah, the lyrics are, I'm not going to read through all of it, but like the themes of the song, the motifs of the song were just basically, you're going through the valley of the shadow of death is the theme of this song.
And you're going home
through the valley of which you're going home, like heaven home.
I'm going home to see my brother. I'm only going over home.
Yeah, going to see my father and all my loved ones who've gone on. Which is sort of reflective of like the themes and motifs of the movie, where like these guys are going through the valley of the shadow of death, but then ultimately like they're hoping not only to just go home, but even if they die, they're going to their eternal rest, which is their escape from this world of woe, as the song says. So
yeah, that's a very thematically fitting song for this film.
Yeah,
because right at the beginning we talk about going home and getting letters from home and stuff.
But then that sort of going home takes on a new meaning throughout the film.
Right, because it starts out with Schofield? Schofield, he hating the idea of going home. He's going to go back the next day.
Yep. Like, yeah, he couldn't, like, he just couldn't say goodbye to his family because it hurt too much. Because he knew they may never see him again. But yeah. Good stuff. So I guess with that we can get into our transcendental analysis. Truth. What can we as Catholics, what sort of truth can we glean from this movie?
War sucks.
Yeah, war is hell on earth.
War sucks, but you can't lose yourself in it, right? There's a way to maintain humanity even in darkness.
Yeah, this movie is like a sort of triumph of the human spirit kind of a movie. But in like not nearly, I mean, it's dramatic, but not like in the sort of theatrically dramatic. Like it's sort of a triumph in a very ordinary human way. You're just trying to survive and do your duty doggedly through like bleak and deadly circumstances. But like that, even like the little things,
taking joy in the little moments of reprieve. with the people that are alive that you can save.
Yeah, like just this one guy delivering a message saves like 1,600 lives, like that.
Well,
kind of
a
thing.
bit less.
A bit less. Yeah.
Several hundred at least.
Yeah. Because he didn't manage to get there to stop the attack entirely, but at least it prevents, the next few waves from having to charge into battle and get killed. So, what else? I guess, I don't know. It's really difficult from a historical standpoint to really truly understand what impact the First World War had on that entire generation, because we'll never know the true extent of it.
Well, it turned around and became World War II pretty quick.
Right. There's that
Right
geopolitically,
after that depression.
but then these guys, the people who did survive, when they came home, they were known as the lost generation, because even though like they survived the war and came home, they were just so racked with PTSD and different things, and like they just had a very difficult time like reintegrating themselves back into society. And so they're all like quite young, and like a lot of people who died in World War One lied about their age as like teenagers to get into the army, and so died before they even got to their 20s. So a lot of these people just coming of age were basically never got to live a full life. Mm-hmm. And so just the impact of one human life can have on an entire generation. Like just imagine, hundreds of thousands of like, the best and brightest, more or less. So I guess that's one reality. Is like we'll never really truly know. I mean, there are things
we may someday, but in our lifetimes, we probably won't be able to grasp the full scope of.
We can grasp a lot of it, from historical context and looking back. I mean, only recently I feel like has been a lot more interest been taken in World War One, but I mean, even though we live over a century later, like we're still kind of living in the shadow of the consequences of that first war. Mm-hmm. Like you go from 1917, you have, the majority of people are still using horses and buggies. Like cars are kind of becoming a common thing. But you go from, just after the Victorian era with that technology to now. You have World War One, World War II, the Cold War. We have computers, cell phones, supersonic jets, and different things like that. We have
more computing power than it took to get to the moon in our pocket.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is more computing power than they had just by hand. So yeah, it's war. How the 20th century really shook up human history in a dramatic way, in a way that was, in my opinion, unprecedented. I mean, like, because you have, big events that happen, but
the only thing that shook up human history that traumatically was the birth of Jesus and then his subsequent death.
Right.
I mean, that altered the course of history in a very profound way, but like, human instigated.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about just with the First World War and Second World War alone, to get back to like the value of human life thing, like it's estimated in World War II alone, like over 70 million people died. I can't remember. Let me check the estimate for. No, not World War II. World War I. I want World War. There we go. Yeah, 20 million. So between World War I and World War II, that's 100 million people over the span of about 20 years, which is pretty.
I mean, the global population has been approximately doubling for the last every 25 years.
Yeah.
So
but at the
global population at the time was dramatically less than it is now. Mm-hmm. So that was a much bigger. That was like a tangible percentage of the world's
and life
population.
Expectancy was much shorter, regardless if you died in war, back then. But yeah, it's something to think about too. Like, like we've been saying, is like, just because this conflict happened over 100 years ago, like we're still living in the consequences of it today, because like as we said, like. The consequences of World War I, then into World War II, and then so on down to where we are today. So it's important to look back through history and try to learn from it.
To see how and why we got here.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause
Yeah.
here's a very weird place. Let's be
Yeah.
real.
Because, yeah, if you compare that to somebody who lived between, say, 1800 and 1900, life didn't look too terribly different. I mean, you had some technological advancements, like you've got the telegraph and the phone and a few other, and like the Industrial Revolution, but
The Industrial Revolution began in like the 1780s.
Right.
So
it wasn't really that dramatic of a shift compared to the 20th century. So
Mhm.
sort of long-winded, but hopefully I guess the point across is like the importance of history.
Mhm.
Because I think one thing from when I've been kind of a history buff since I was 4 years old, but that's not even a joke. What I find is like a lot of people I talk to, history was like their least favorite class, or they just never really understood why they should care about it.
It was never presented in a way that I found interesting.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is a lot of the value of movies like 1917 is that they present the war in such a way where it's not like glorifying it. It's just
Very matter of fact.
just
This
drawing
is-
it. Yeah, this is what it was.
is.
Because I mean, war movies of like the 60s and 70s and stuff, some of them were sort of over dramatized, and
Yeah,
They were
there's-
focused on the heroism of World
yeah,
War II.
Mhm.
there's moments of heroism, but you don't get this like adrenaline rush from the guy doing this heroic thing. You're just kind of smacked not so much smacked, but you're just like, they hold up this gruesome thing into your face and say, look at it.
mm-hmm.
Look at it.
Yeah. And you might squirm a little bit, but like you grit your teeth and have to face the reality of it.
We're going to have to do an episode on Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh yeah,
That one's a really good one.
that's another
anyway,
film I've been meaning
later.
to watch. But yeah, probably an episode coming up too. Yeah. Let's see what we're on. We're on a little bit of a roll there. What was?
We're getting to the end of the truth segment.
Yeah, probably. So, what 1917 does well is like presents history to people. So I hope it's helpful in that way to get people thinking about, because I think like you were saying, Nathan, it just wasn't presented in a way that was interesting or grabbed your attention. But I think
Right.
history needs to be made real to people, because this is stuff that really happened, even if this is like a somewhat fictionalized
Right.
version of things that happened. Like at the beginning of the credits of 1917, it's like based on stories told by
The director's one of his ancestors, dad or grandpa or something.
Mm-hmm. Told him these stories, and so that inspired him to make the movie.
Right. When it's a list of abstract names and dates and places, and you're bad at names,
Mm-hmm.
it really just becomes unfun.
Yeah.
But when it's like real situations with real people with real like ties to your actual life, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, this makes sense why I should care about it.
Yeah. And for those of our listeners who are like similar age as us, like the average age, I think, for both World War II and World War I of the soldiers who fought in the war was somewhere around 22, 23. So people were fighting and dying for their country like when they were our age. So they were just as real as you and I. So something to think about. Goodness. What goodness does this film bring forward in the sort of bleak and dreariness of war?
I think, like we mentioned, just kind of these moments of rest amongst the chaos and
Mm-hmm.
death and disorder, just a little reprieve to get
Mhm.
your head squared away.
I think
Especially the one where he finds the French lady's little bunker,
Mm-hmm.
and where he's just kind of playing with the baby.
And she's like, I need to feed her, but I don't have anything because she can only drink milk. He's like, I've got milk, because they'd passed by
he
that
filled
cow.
his flask with it.
Yeah, and so
Mhm.
it's like a near providential little moment where, like, even in this like hellish environment, like he was able to do able to provide for this little kid.
Yeah. I think Blake does a really good job exemplifying the good of this movie, the goodness in the movie, because he's very, very optimistic in being able to save his brother, and he trusts in the impact this message will have
Mm-hmm.
in saving people, and he motivates his friend to also have that faith and that hope and that realization of the goodness.
I think it sort of represents how, like, in a lot of films, especially the ones recently I've seen, where like Blake and Schofield sort of represent the two types, like the two people in war, those who live and those who die. And like the best ones always seem to be the ones who die. But then like that makes their sacrifice all the more meaningful.
A thought just occurred to me that Blake is kind of like the Kamina of 1917.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
All of his attitudes and values.
Listen to our Gurren Lagann episode.
Listen to the Gurren
I
Lagann
know what we're
episode.
talking
the
about.
heavens. I'm gonna go beat up the moon now.
I'm going there to pierce the heavens. Something forevermore. Yeah.
Kind of brazen, audacious, not really thinking about the consequences. Just we gotta go, man.
Yeah, we gotta do our duty.
We gotta do it.
Mm-hmm.
Ends up dying for it, just trying to help someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, did we ever talk about the reason Blake dies? He's like, oh yeah, we did.
he was stabbed.
He was
by the
trying by the pilot. He was trying to save.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to save a guy, and it was a German soldier, but it's like they didn't really want anyone to die.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, or was Schofield like we should kill him?
Yeah, he's
And
like, we
Blake was
should
all like,
put
"No,
him
no,
out
we
of his
can save him."
misery.
Yeah, because he was like sort of badly burnt and stuff. He's like, no, we gotta take care of him. And so, in trying to perform an act of human charity, like Blake ends up being killed, by this sort of ungrateful pilot they rescued. But yeah, then another thing too with Schofield is he's like his character is very much sort of has like this the aura of sort of like survivor's guilt kind of a thing. At least like at the beginning of the movie, like he's seen horrors and he's like, I honestly don't know why I'm still alive compared to all these other people who are just as good as me. And oftentimes with veterans, that'll be the case for them, where that's something they have to deal with, is like the fact that they survived and these other people didn't, even though they were in the same situation. So, like the human costs of war. Beauty.
Well, we already talked about the presentation, and it's really the presentation is really good. It's like
it's beautiful in a very sort of somber, very melancholy, but still like inspiring in its own way. Like
and just like the craftsmanship of the whole film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the historically accurate uniforms. I mean, I'm not like that kind of history buff where I wasn't like micro-analyzing all their uniforms to make sure that this and that and the other thing was absolutely correct. But, like the presentation, like the set design, the, the characters, like the actors were very well cast, I think. Yeah, they did a good job.
The film as a whole wasn't particularly beautiful.
No.
But it painted a very somber, real picture that got its point across really well.
Mm-hmm. And it was sort of I'm trying to think of a better word to say it, but sort of like beauty in the way that pain is beautiful in a certain light when you think about it. Because, I mean, as Catholics, that's one of the things where suffering is redemptive when it's, when you unite to the sufferings of Christ and stuff. But like if you are suffering but to achieve a good end, then it is worth it. It is not, useless or meaningless.
Right. It doesn't add any glory to the suffering. It just exposes the suffering and lets you kind of just sit in there for a bit and contemplate. Just kind of feel it out and really it's very somber. It's very solemn. It's very respectful, but also very real.
Yeah. So I guess fairly recently we celebrated, or it was about a month ago now, but Veterans Day was instituted. I think multiple countries celebrate November 11th as like Armistice Day, where it was like at the end of World War I. But at like the 11th day at the 11th hour, like in the 11th month is when they honor the fallen. So I guess, it's good to sort of remember these people and the sacrifice that they gave. Yeah, which is sort of beautiful in that tragic kind of way. Not that these were necessarily you don't want to like idolize anybody, but then just sort of like from a sort of from a like sort of a human standpoint, like respect them for what what they went through. Let's see. Yeah, this like the score of the film as well. Like it wasn't like Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, but it
added to the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The music was never in your face. It was always in the background.
Everything,
but
was
it was
in
very
service
present
to the moment.
Right, exactly.
It
was totally
to it.
integrated into the moment, never overtaking it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause I think they didn't emphasize the music so much because that's the sort of thing that stirs up these bigger emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they stayed away from.
And like in other films, it can be taken like to glorify like the violence and things going on, whereas like this is very much to like kind of let the horror of war take center stage and not really be clouded by or obscured, I suppose. And the actions being performed on screen and stuff, but definitely helps build tension and drives the emotional impact of the movie.
As a cinematic tool, it was used quite effectively.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of moments of silence in the movie, ironically. But like when there is music, it is used very impactfully. But yeah. Unity.
Yeah. We've talked kind of at great length about things related to the unity of this film. How all the pieces are in service to this grim picture of World War I, life in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
But also there's that recurring theme of home, of going home after the war, the hope of that got people through wars like World War I and II, and even still do to this day.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and it's like I suppose it's appropriate, like in the season of Advent, which is supposed to be a very similar thing, where like we're awaiting the coming of Christ. Like, I mean, in the celebration of Christmas, but then also is like a few homilies I've listened to recently at Mass and whatnot, like. Also like, the second coming where we all one day go home.
And they send their messenger through the wilderness.
Oh, yeah.
It's a Christmas movie.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, it is literally a Christmas movie. It takes place at Christmas time.
Does it?
Yes. They say that multiple times.
What? It doesn't look like winter.
It's France.
Because it's France in the middle of
they have
torn
winter
up
in
war.
France.
They don't have snow all that much.
Yeah, but there's cherry blossoms.
I'm pretty sure they mentioned Christmas at least.
Well,
a few
being
times.
the cliche is being home for Christmas during war, but that was like an actual like.
Had they just come home from being home at Christmas? Is that what they were talking about?
I think that might have been it. It was early spring.
Yeah.
That it happened.
Yeah.
Disregard.
Yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, it's something to think about during this season that we are currently in.
If you're listening to this not in this season, hello from the future.
Yes.
Does 2020 end?
Or do we just have December 32nd and so on of 2020? Well, I guess any final thoughts?
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
At least the half I watched.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in watching the other half at some point.
Yeah. It's good to shake up. Like, there's movies you have for entertainment and then transcendental value and certain things, but it's good to shake that up with a movie that sort of makes you think in a good way.
Well, we like movies that make us think.
Oh, yes.
Like
right.
Most of the movies we watch, unless they're...
something with solemnity and weight to it.
Right.
So, yeah. You have your Avengers, and then you have like your war films or like Passion of the Christ or something, which sort of stir different parts of your heart. That being said, thank you for listening. You can listen to our podcasts on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. You can follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter, at Palapapists. And you can email us with your questions, comments, concerns, and complaints at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. Yeah. appreciate you listening to the podcast. And one thing I was thinking, listen to all these podcasts. You got The Crunch, you got Catching Foxes, and they just rattle off all the names of these high-profile people they know and like Catholic celebrity or whatever. I was thinking the other day, I was like, you know what? I'm a podcast host, and I've also met these people. I've met Jason Everett. I've met Matt Fratt. I've met Dr. Tedward Shree. I've met Curtis Martin and all these cool people. We're cool like that too. So if you're that superficial and vapid and want to listen to us for those reasons, go ahead.
I have a signed book by Dr. Shree, so take that.
Yeah.
I went to a camp with Father Mike Schmitz as a kid.
There you go. Yeah.
I hung out with him for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I went to a youth rally with Chris Stefanik. You get the point.
We're cool too.
We're cool like that. We got roped into focus. Some of us got roped into focus conferences, and that's really why all this stuff happens. But and no, it doesn't really make us that special. But yeah, fun stuff. On that note, we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.